All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth McDonough, and I'm on the marketing team here at Classy. And I have the pleasure of introducing everyone to today's webinar, 5 Ways to Use Texting to Conquer Your Fundraising Goals. Today's webinar is co-hosted by the team at Hustle, a one-to-one texting platform that allows you to reach your donor base at scale, and the Human Rights Campaign, America's largest LGBTQ civil rights organization. We're super excited to have them with us today, and I'll pass things off to your presenters in just a moment here. But before I do that, I do want to cover a few housekeeping items. We want to ensure that today's webinar session is as interactive as possible. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions. If you use the chat window and go to webinar, we'll do our best to get follow up with all the questions we receive during the session. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we'll also be following up with you after the fact. So keep an eye out for an email from us. And also a friendly reminder that we will be sending out the webinar recording and slides shortly after the session concludes today. So keep an eye out for those in your inbox, and then you'll be able to access this content on demand. All right, so with that being said, I'll have each speaker do a quick intro of themselves. And Shay, I'll let you kick us off.
Perfect. Hey, everybody. This is Shay Morrissey. I'm on the Hustle team over here. I'm a senior manager and work with our nonprofit and education clients. Prior to Hustle, I was a development and communications director at a nonprofit. So very excited to speak with you all about our topic today. Ben, you want to go ahead next?
Great. And I'm Ben Needham at the Human Rights Campaign. I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives. My job here is sort of leveraging all of our assets to expand LGBTQ equality and making sure we are up to date on the latest tools and the latest case studies out there that will help us expand our work. I'll kick it over to you, Alex.
Hey, my name's Alex Kreger. I'm an events manager also at the Human Rights Campaign. So I manage a number of gala dinners we have across the country. And before this, I was a political fundraiser and I did fundraising events in Wisconsin for some political candidates running there.
All right, and hi again. This is Elizabeth. I am a marketing manager here at Classy, and I am a co-host of almost all of our webinars. So I get, the great opportunity to work with partners like Hustle on a regular basis, and I'll be fielding the questions that we receive from you guys today. So thanks again for joining us.
All right, perfect. I'll take it from there. Okay, so today it's pretty obvious what we're going to be talking about given the title of this webinar. But first of all, let's talk about what started this conversation in the first place, which is some of the challenges that we face in fundraising. Donor retention is a challenge, and donor acquisition is also getting more expensive. We're seeing 75% of new donors lapse within a year. We're also seeing the acquisition of those donors increase in cost. And so the fewer we can retain, the more we're spending on acquiring new donors. And donor retention is steadily decreasing by 50%. So these are all things that we obviously want to address. And some questions that we're going to talk through today include, what can we do to keep new and existing donors engaged? How do we increase donation amount and frequency over time and really build on those relationships that started somewhere? And how do we set our organizations apart and build deeper relationships with our supporters? Okay, so one of the answers, of course, there's no one solution to these issues, but donors love texting. This is something that we are seeing across the board. There's a 98% average open rate for text messages. When you think about getting a text from a real phone number and think about how often you open that and read it, it's really, really high percentage. 95% of texts are read within 3 minutes of being sent. So it's that real-time engagement and conversation. We're seeing average open rates and response rates around 45%, which means that you're actually having an opportunity to engage people in a one-to-one conversation. And also, 89% of consumers want to use this sort of messaging. So we're seeing a a shift in the kinds of communication people want and where to reach them. All right, so beyond the stats, one-to-one texting really helps your organization have real, genuine conversations with supporters in real time and build that affinity and trust. These conversations allow supporters to meaningfully connect with your work. There's obviously a lot of people getting a lot of information and engagement from a lot of different organizations, and we want to find ways to reach them in ways that connect them to what we're doing and making them feel a part of it. It also allows organizations to learn more about your community of supporters, what's resonating with them, what's not resonating with them, and how can you leverage that information in your other channels. So I'm going to hand it off to my friend Ben, who was one of the first champions of Hustle in general across the board in the nonprofit sector specifically, and brought Hustle into HRC.
Thank you, Shay. So I want to start off by just talking a little bit about the Human Rights Campaign. We are the largest LGBTQ civil rights organization in the country. We have more than 3 million members and supporters nationwide. Our vision is a world where LGBTQ people are ensured of their basic rights and can be open and honest and safe at home, at work, and in their communities. We were founded in 1980 as the first gay and lesbian political action fund in the United States, or as one of the first. The mission was to provide financial support on behalf of the gay and lesbian community to political candidates who supported gay civil rights legislation. We quickly rose to prominence in 1982 when we became the 17th largest independent political action committee out there. And then in 1995, we dropped the fund because we realized that our work was really more than just donating to candidates, but we had an obligation to really figure out how we were advancing LGBTQ equality at every single level of a person's life. And so we dropped the fund and we expanded our work beyond political lobbying. And we really dug into sort of our foundation work at that point. And it's that transformation that really have paved the way for the powerful organization that we've become today. We started small here at the Human Rights Campaign. We tested Hustle in Project One America states, which focuses on our work in the Deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas. In 2016, we expanded Hustle into our election efforts, mainly in North Carolina, where we defeated an anti-LGBTQ governor there. And then after the 16 elections, as we were talking about how do we have one of our largest expansions around grassroots organizing, how our national field program was using this, membership and fundraising, we decided to expand our contract even bigger and really made it a organization-wide contract with Hustle so that we were really engaging with our members and supporters out there. To date, we've sent 1 million plus messages to our over 3 million members and supporters all across the country. We've had a little bit over 400,000 people reached, and we've had engagement of roughly about 22% of that engagement. That is tremendous for us, and that is the type of results that we saw when we started small, that we knew that we could scale with Hustle, talking to our members and supporters and really engaging people around the work that we're doing all across the country. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Shay.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. It's been pretty amazing to work with you all as you've gone from those few states to the national work across departments. All right. So as you can imagine, all the work that nonprofits do, there are lots of ways to leverage texting, and specifically Hustle and one-to-one texting in those organizations. So among those, we're gonna go through a few today. Advocacy is one. Ben just spoke a little bit to that as well. Engagement and retention of supporters and donors. Event attendance. So what does it look like to not only increase event attendance through acquisition of new folks, but also making sure that the folks that are already on board are showing up, Giving Tuesday, and also amplifying other channels. So direct mail and other channels like that I'll get a little more into later. All right, I'm going to hand it back to Ben to talk a little more about advocacy.
Yeah, great. So we started out using Hustle pretty much as an advocacy tool for us. It was introduced, and we immediately thought this is a great way to for us to organize around some of our advocacy battles, especially in the Deep South. We were dealing with so-called religious freedom bills, which we call license to discriminate. We were dealing with license to discriminate bills that related to adoption and foster care. And so we really thought, like, how can we engage our membership around advocacy? Our first test was in Alabama. That was a true test where before the legislative session, we wanted to really figure out how we could bring multiple numbers of people together to talk about the upcoming legislative session. We planned 6 events in Alabama. We invited everyone in those communities that we went into. And when it was all said and done, we had to change locations in 3 of our communities because we were using Hustle, engaging people around the work that we were going to be doing, but inviting them to come figure out what was going to be coming down the pipe and how they could engage. Birmingham, Alabama, we were expecting 50 people, and we had over 100 people show up in that location. And we didn't just invite people to town halls. We then turned around and started using Hustle to put out our Text to Patch Through program, where we were engaging with the speaker in the Alabama House and the Senate Pro Tem and the governor and judiciary members, and telling them not to pass bad pieces of legislation in the state. We use Hustle to update people on hearings and what was decided and what the process was. And we gave people an opportunity to help us engage around advocacy. In Alabama, we had a child care bill that was slated to be one of the worst bills that was going to be introduced and signed into legislation in the country. And because of our advocacy work and using Hustle to engage our membership, we actually were able to water down that bill. We knew we couldn't defeat the bill, but we knew that with our force and our membership in the state, that we could communicate in a way to water down the bill and make that bill less harmful to foster care kids and parents that wanted to adopt kids. We then looked at that and said, if we can do this around a legislative issue, my God, what can we do around electoral stuff? And so we started playing around with Hustle around the elections in November 2016 in North Carolina. And it really was, one, trying to remind people that they could register to vote. 2, reminding people that they could vote early and share in their voting early locations. And 3, in trying to answer any questions that they may have about voting. People wanted to know what time the early vote locations was open. Were there lines at those locations? What happens if I run into a problem? One of the cases that sticks out to me in North Carolina is we had a member and supporter who reached out to us after we reached out and talked about early voting. And she was nervous about voting in this election. And she shared her story with us by saying, "Hi, I am a trans woman. I will be voting first time as a woman in North Carolina. And I'm nervous that not all of my records will match the way I present myself. What should I do when I go vote?" And through that process, we were able to walk her through what she needed to do to go vote. We convinced her to go vote early in case that there was any problems, where we could report this and figure out how we solve those problems. And through Hustle, we helped someone who was nervous about voting have a wonderful experience in North Carolina, voting early and casting her ballot for the candidates of her choice. And so that is what Hustle has been able to do from us, both from an advocacy perspective of really just purely trying to do legislative work, but also from the electoral work. If I had all the time in the world, I would tell you about Texas, where we had over 25 bills introduced in 2017, and how we were able to kill most of those bills, and how we used Hustle to turn out over 800 plus people for a lobby day at the state capitol in Austin, in Texas. And Hustle has just been a great tool for us achieving our work and really expanding LGBTQ equality. But I think the most important thing about that is it has allowed us to empower others to figure out how they're expanding LGBTQ equality in their local communities. And so with that, I will pass it on to the next presenter, which I think is still me. And so I just want to talk a little bit about sort of our engagement and retention in the South. In the South, it is a tough place to communicate with your members and supporters. We are still dealing with not the best Wi-Fi services in the South. We have a large number of people that do not have home computers, and so they are not receiving information in the way that big cities are receiving information. But one of the things we knew with polling and how we were already engaging is that texting with our membership was a more effective way of engaging. Most people didn't have home phones, and so our call list was pretty bad. Most people, telephone numbers were incorrect, and so that was also bad for us. But when we started texting with people, we started to get a different response. We use Hustle to engage around our legislative work, but also around our municipal equality index and educating people about what their cities were doing to protect LGBTQ people and how they could engage with us in their cities to provide those protections. We went from having 2 and 3 people engaging with us in these communities in the Deep South to turning out 15 and 20 and 30, and even in some cases, 50 and 60 people to engage with us. We use Hustle to build lobby day visits in all 3 states where we've had anywhere from 30 to 75 people show up to lobby. We use Hustle to pass non-discrimination policies in places like Jackson, Mississippi, and Birmingham, Alabama, and Clarksdale, Mississippi, where we engage with our membership around these are the things that you need to be doing to help us pass a non-discrimination policy and get it signed into law to protect LGBTQ people in your communities. And so what Hustle has done, it has helped us figure out a way to engage differently with our membership in hard to reach places, but is also allowing us to keep them engaged in the process over and over again. Beforehand, we would call, we would try to host events, but it was really difficult having an ongoing conversation with the members and supporters in the Deep South. And Hustle has really changed that dynamic for us. It also helped us sort of look at what other ways we could be using Hustle. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Alex, who's going to explain how we started out in advocacy and electoral work, but then we really shifted to some of our fundraising work and how we were building our membership as well.
Yes, thank you, Ben. So we saw all of the amazing work Ben and his team were doing, and we're jealous, and so decided to do it ourselves as well. So my primary use of Hustle started out with inviting folks to the gala dinners and inviting them to those events. And we were astounded to see the engagement that we had with people, and we're able to really broaden it. One of the things we saw after 2016, after the election, was this mass of people who wanted to get involved, but they wanted to be involved with lots of organizations. They weren't exactly sure what they wanted to do. And so there was this question of how do we hook these people? How do we really interact with these folks and make sure that they know what HRC is doing, how to get involved, and how to stick with us? And Hustle's been a really helpful tool in that because it allows us to interact with those folks on a one-to-one level and really figure out what they're most interested in, whether it's donating to an event, showing up for an event, buying a raffle ticket, whatever that is, and engage them in that way and meet them where they're at. As we texted, you can see on the PowerPoint on the screen, this is one of the text campaigns we did for our national dinner, asking people to donate to our auction. And this is something that we had done that was brand new, and we really didn't know what the success will be. A lot of auction donors are businesses, so it was unclear. And we had really positive responses from folks who had no idea that we could reach them in this way, and we're really excited to be a part of the event. And so you can see here, Patricia donated a fabulous photo. I'd have to go back and look to see how much it went for in the auction, but it was definitely included, and photos of Obama are very, very popular with our group. We also had, I have a couple examples of text campaigns where, one in Colorado, for example, we were reaching out about attending an event and had a back and forth and went pretty extensively. They were interested in donating to the event, interested in having an auction item, and I was actually able to go find that individual at the event itself and give them a big hug. These people really feel like they formed an incredible personal connection with you, and I'm consistently impressed with how Hustle has allowed us to really connect with our donors. I'll also just use an example of reaching out to some corporate folks. And we had reached out to a group of people for a Columbus event, our annual Columbus dinner, and we had someone respond saying they were interested in purchasing some tickets and could they learn more. And we had a full text conversation until it got to the point that they were ready to give us their credit card number. Then we stopped and went by phone, where they actually decided to purchase an entire table, which is several $1,000s in revenue. And they had been interested about HRC, they'd heard about HRC, but they hadn't had anyone personally ask them to attend this event. And so it just had gone by the wayside. Like, they'd seen an email, but maybe thought about it and hadn't replied. And so they needed that specific text message to hear from us and to engage further. We've actually started using some text campaigns multiple years in a row as we start to hit a full year of using Hustle. So we can have those conversations for next year's dinner continue on the same chain and say, like, we're so glad to have you join us. We'd like to have you back. And it's been really incredible to see how people get to the event and they want to meet Alex who texted me, or they want to meet Mike who texted me, because they feel like they have a relationship with that individual and thereby the organization. And that's going to lead right into my next slide, which is event attendance, because we do the bulk of texting the bulk of texting I do is for our gala dinners. And then we've also worked with some other other teams that do text messaging for smaller events, some community fundraisers as well. These are really important because a lot of folks, it allows us to engage folks that we might not reach otherwise. I'm in my late 20s. I know I have thousands of emails that I have unopened. And so while we're still reaching out in those more traditional methods, the text message is something that allows us to engage with people that we might not be able to reach out to otherwise. We always invite the kind of list that we typically reach out to is our past folks that have attended the event. And then we also try and reach out to folks who give in certain ranges or live in a certain zip code to see if we can engage new people. What we've also realized is a lot of our corporate attendees who attend dinners via their company buying a table or their company sponsoring the event, those folks are excited enough about HRC, excited enough about the mission to attend an event and hopefully while they're there be really inspired, have a great time, and then they walk away. And a lot of times the only contact information we have for them is a phone number. And texting has allowed us to reach those people. And so we've gotten responses like, oh, my company sponsored last time. Let me see if they're doing it again. What that means is internally, that individual's going to their company, the person that manages those sponsorships, and saying like, hi, can I get a ticket? I want to go back. That allows the company to know that their investment is really appreciated by their employees and hopefully encourages them to keep supporting the event. And really demonstrates to them the value in sponsoring our dinners. Having that kind of internal language is something that there's really no other way for us to get that. We don't have a lot of employees that respond to emails saying, we don't have a lot of those employees' email addresses, quite frankly. So having them go internally and tell their company how valuable it is really meaningful for us. And in fact, at that dinner, we had a lot of last minute ticket purchases from companies asking for just one more spot. And there's no way for me to have data, but I don't think it was a coincidence. I think it was because these people went to their companies and asked for extra spots. These are also people that now that they've hopefully gone to 1 or 2 dinners, we can engage them at the dinner and continue to text them, and hopefully in the long term, they'll be buying their own tickets, they'll be engaging their friends, and they'll be consistently engaged with the organization in a way that they never would have had they not received that direct communication from us. We also have just seen increased numbers in our event attendance. We typically text out, can you join us for the event? And then if folks reply, we often do some sort of a discount link to encourage them to go buy that ticket right away. And that's really helped us reach everyone and make sure everyone has gotten a personal invite in a way that's not possible in any other way. We get really positive responses from folks who are excited to attend the event. And like I said, some of them walk in and give us a big hug when they arrive. And I will pass it off to our next person.
All right, thanks, Alex. That's me. So everybody's probably got Giving Tuesday on the brain a bit. For those who don't know, Giving Tuesday is a social media and digital driven event. On Hustle, it's pretty young in how we've seen it used, but already there are some results that I can share with you, and it's pretty exciting to have another way to engage folks on that day, since this is a big one. So on Giving Tuesday in 2017, 26% of digital donations to nonprofits were made on mobile devices. In addition, 28% of all nonprofits, which I'm sure most of you know, receive between 25 and 50% of their annual donations for their year-end asks, and Giving Tuesday is obviously a big part of that. When we're thinking about emails, direct mail, phone calls, they're all really great ways to prime supporters leading up to Giving Tuesday and continue to outreach on Giving Tuesday. But the key differentiator can be the text message on that day. It's quick, it's effective, and it yields almost immediate results because you're sharing that link that folks are going to click on and give that donation. It also is going to let you know who says they will do it. And then you can pull that data back into the system on who made that pledge and then didn't actually give, and follow up via Hustle as well. Your staff and volunteers can launch thousands of conversations within an hour. So Hustle is really a really quick way for people to have that conversation on that key day of engagement. Just a few examples. One of our partners reached out to 30% of their donor base via text, and nearly 95% of those people reached pledged a gift on Giving Tuesday. So if we're looking at those numbers and that segmentation and who to reach out to and when, Giving Tuesday can be a really great day to try something out and do that outreach all at once, really quickly, but in a personal way. Another partner also increased their total number of donations by 40% compared to the previous year on Hustle. And one more partner saw a 3 to 4 times higher conversion rate with text message than with phone calls. So we're looking at all of these channels as working together, not necessarily independent from one another, which leads me to the next slide on amplifying channels. All right, perfect. So when we think about all of the channels that we use to engage donors, new, sustainers, all of them, we want to think about peer-to-peer texting, one-to-one texting as a way to amplify those existing channels, because obviously we're going to keep doing a lot of those additional things, not necessarily a full replacement for your other programs. So a couple things to consider as you're thinking about ways to leverage Hustle or one-to-one text is to use text message to follow up or prime for a direct mail piece or an email. So you send a text, either when sometime around when that mail is set to drop, you can include an MMS with a picture of that mail piece, so people have sort of that visual association that they can make. So when it lands on their doorstep or in their mailbox, they immediately think like, oh yeah, I know what this is. Definitely gonna open it. And you can also send a text first and then follow up with a phone call to increase that pickup rate. On the direct mail front, especially year-end time is a great time to consider amplifying that specific channel. One partner that we worked with saw a 31% increase in direct mail response after a follow-up text compared to mail without a follow-up text. And then another thing that I'd love to bring up is, especially since we're on here with Classy, is on the peer-to-peer fundraising side and using one-to-one text and hustle as a way to coach those fundraisers and amplify that channel of revenue. So a couple examples for you. One of our partners used a text message for peer-to-peer fundraising for an annual race to raise some funds for research. They reached out to existing race registrants to encourage them to spread the word and get their friends and family to participate or donate. By activating that group of core peer-to-peer fundraisers, they were able to double the number of race registrations in just 1 week. So especially when we're talking about real people, real supporters who are doing fundraising on behalf of our organizations, that one-to-one conversation, the ability to answer questions in real time is incredibly valuable. Another partner who does an annual cycling race, raising funds for research, contacted close to 1,000 registrants to incentivize them to get one or more friend or family member to join the race as well. And this outreach resulted in a 10% increase in registrations, which raised an estimated $100,000 more than it would have otherwise. So these are all ways in which you can use one-to-one texting and hustle to really amplify the impact of those other channels. So now that we've talked through some of these examples, let's move into how to actually get started. There are a variety of use cases, and so we're going to go over a little bit about implementation with your organization. So the first thing that you want to do is determine what the goal is. There are so many different use cases that you could implement. Some are really, really light lifts that you can do easily and quickly to engage folks. And these are some examples. So based on the use cases we talked about, especially when we're talking about end of year, you want to consider matching campaigns, progress to goal, things that are time sensitive and time bound, but also using Hustle as a touch point for potentially other lower bar asks or other types of engagement leading up to those bigger asks. You also want to think about, you can go ahead and move on to the next slide, Amber. After you determine what your goal is, who are you going to reach out to? Who are you going to engage around this goal? I definitely encourage always testing everything all the time, especially with new forms of engagement. We want to make sure that we're testing scripts, that we're testing different donor segments around different use cases, and really finding out based on your audience, your supporters, what is going to work best for them. All right, and then this is a big question that almost everybody has. Great, wonderful, who actually does the texting? So there are a few different ways to tackle this one. Depending on the scale of the outreach, the timing of the outreach, etc., there are 3 primary ways in which you can use Hustle. So either your internal team does the texting. So that's what Alex was talking about, the gala outreach. They have their internal team do that texting because they want to have that engagement on such a personal level that they can end it in a hug at the dinner and close that loop. So that's pretty important to them. You can have volunteers do texting. You just set them up as agents, especially for large scale outreach for advocacy. That's a very common path. And then the other option is that we have partners at contact centers, call centers, who now also are integrating Hustle into what they will offer. And so if you have, you don't have necessarily the internal capacity and it's not something that you want volunteers to work on, you can also work through us and with a contact center to do that texting and have those conversations. And part of that, all of those folks, get training and everything that's necessary. But the other common question that comes up is, what does it look like? What are the best practices on a platform like this? And so we have a saying over here, hustle like a human. We want to make sure that we are keeping it authentic, personal. This is a text conversation. It shouldn't look like an email. It shouldn't look like a broadcast message. It should look like a one-to-one conversation and have a willingness to engage this person on those things. So if you think about the text messages from your friends or family, or with your friends and family, or anybody that you have a relationship with, what that looks like is something like this. You're addressing the person by name, you're introducing yourself and who you're with. You're giving folks some idea of why you're texting them, and then you're ending it in a question so that there is a reason for them to actually engage with you. And emojis also increase engagement rate. So you're also going to want to throw some of those in there as relevant as well. Have some fun with it.
And if I can add to Shay, I just want to
of course.
I want to add that, first of all, the emojis is serious. People love their emojis. It's great. We've also done some experimenting with including a photo. We did for a raffle where it was raffling a car. And if you're anything like me, you can say the name and model of a car over and over again. It means nothing. So the photo was really important, and the Hustle team was really helpful in like what makes sense in that case. But it is really incredible the personal responses that we get from people. And yeah, we had some hustle banks that we did. The whole development team went and hustled before the elections for some political outreach. And it was really incredible to see people responding with why they were voting and why they cared. And being able to just have that really genuine response with them and talk like a human made all the difference.
Thanks, Alex. So the next piece of this is always okay. So we've shared a lot of data in this presentation, but what sort of data do you have access to? So and how do you want to measure success? There's some conversion that will live either within or outside of the system, but in Hustle itself, we have a dashboard where you can see engagement rate, messages sent, how different audiences and different groups are responding versus others. What's your opt-out rate? You can use tags within Hustle to also attribute a reason to opt-outs, and that can be tracked as well. Additionally, we have an integration with Salesforce and also with Vans. So if either of those are databases you use, that's another way in which you can easily get that data and sync it into your primary CRM. So at this point, I think that we can move into Q&A. Are there any immediate questions out there?
Shay, we've got a couple of questions. Yeah, no worries. So we've got a question from Dana. She wants to know, should you send them the donation link in the initial text you send, or should you send them the donation link in a response?
That is a great question. Thank you for asking. So you want to send them the donation link in the follow-up, in the reply, or even in the second reply. There are a couple of reasons for that. The first is that the first and primary really is that there are different criteria that phone carriers use to filter messages from real phone numbers, and putting the link in the first text is one of those. So I would avoid it at all costs if you can, because you want to make sure that your messages are getting through to that intended audience. And also just, in the spirit of engaging folks and having that conversation and growing that relationship. That's another reason why we'd want to put that in at least the follow-up response.
Awesome, thanks. One more follow-up question from Dana. What's the best way to start these conversations with people who you have never talked to before? In other words, how do you initiate the ask? I know this can vary based on the goal, but are there any general best practices for initial peer-to-peer text specifically focused on fundraising?
Yeah, that has been a really big conversation with a lot of organizations. I think it's a really important question for us to work through right now. And Alex, of course, feel free to hop in as well. What
Absolutely.
we want to make sure is that the message that you're sending your supporter is relevant to them. So I'm not sure if you mean people you've never talked to before, as in never texted before, or completely cold outreach. But either way, if these folks are coming from any list that would be potential supporters, you want to make sure that that first touch is warm and relevant to them. And so it might be an issue-based outreach at first and not necessarily a cold ask, and build a little bit first before you go ahead and ask them for a donation.
Yeah, we don't typically start with, can you contribute X? We start with, would you be interested in joining us for this event? And while they do have to purchase tickets, focusing on like, you want to come to this event, it's going to be really fun, we'd love to have you, is warmer than just a cold donation, because we do want them in the room with us. When we text, it's off for the fundraising text, we cater it to where their giving level is. So just like, call time, emails, whatever, you don't want to be asking someone who's given $5 a month every month to give $5,000. That's not a good ask, and that is really going to turn them off. So really, it's just about catering the text to the group you're reaching out to and making sure the ask makes sense and is delivered in a really warm way that you're excited to talk to them. And I like the idea of reaching out to them about issues first or inviting them to an event first, and always have emojis in the ask.
Thank you, guys. From Jessica, can you repeat the model you used to script the initial text?
Sure. And Amber, if you want to go up to that script best practices, that might help as well. Perfect. So essentially, you want to make sure that you're addressing the person by name, that you are introducing yourself by name and the organization that you're with, so that it's really easy for them to identify you. You want to give them enough information to engage with you, end in a question, and use an emoji. That's sort of the general template, and you can use that in whatever way you'd like. The other thing that I'll offer up is that you can create custom fields in Hustle that allow you to customize these scripts even further. So for example, if this is a previous donor and they gave in 2016, but they haven't given since then, you could have a custom field for last gift year or something like that, and upload that. And so when you put it into the script, it would instead say something like, thank you so much for your gift in gift year. And that will, there's a liquid variable that will load that 2016 year into the script automatically. So it also makes it really easy for you to have those personalized conversations with information relevant to that person. Great question.
Awesome. From James, can Hustle tell if it's a mobile number?
Yeah, so when you upload your list or import it from your CRM into Hustle, we scrub that list on the way in, and you can actually export that list as well. It's going to have a column called phone type that will let you know if it's mobile, VoIP, or a landline. And so it's also kind of a nice side benefit to better know, okay, who on this list do I not have a cell phone number for that I should be calling instead?
Awesome. From Lauren, how would you suggest going back to previous donors to obtain their cell numbers to begin texting?
That is a great question. Yeah. And I think that, in the same way that email wasn't always on every intake form everywhere, and now it is, we want to start doing that with mobile as well. So if you are recruiting for an event, if your organization is tabling, if you have an email going out for a specific action that you need people to sign up for, anywhere where you collect information, I would start integrating mobile into those forms.
Great. From Carol, any great tips for following up pledges that don't donate immediately?
Yeah. 2 tips actually. One, if they don't donate immediately, but they said that they did, don't follow up so quickly. Sometimes people need just, and that's a learning, that we found over time. If they said they're going to give on a Monday and they haven't given by Tuesday, maybe give them a couple more days to make that donation, and then you can follow up with them. And there are ways within Hustle to target those folks again, with a gentle reminder that some gratitude that they pledged in the first place, and then a gentle reminder with more information, ask them if they have any questions to fulfill that pledge.
Great. A 2-part question from Laura. The first part is, can you send a mass text message and merge in the first name field?
Can you send so you can merge the first name field. That is definitely a feature within Hustle, and any custom field that you add in addition to the name field and a couple others that exist, you can use those in scripts. In terms of sending a blast, so that's something that we should clarify here is that there are broadcast tools, and then there are peer-to-peer, one-to-one tools. And so Hustle is a one-to-one tool, meaning that you need two things. One, it's going to come from a real number, and you can create that can be a local number based on the group's location within Hustle. So you can text from a real local number, but because of that, what it means is that you need to press send on every message. You can send 40 to 50 texts a minute really quickly. And so it's not a blast in that sense. You don't push send once and it goes out to a bunch of people, but you can get through a really big list really quickly and merge those fields and have that be personalized. It's a really great question. Thanks for bringing it up.
Awesome. And then part 2.
Just to kind of do timing, I typically, when we do a gala text, we often have maybe 2,000, 1,500 to 2,000. So it's not a huge list, but I'm typically able to do that by myself in a day. So the responses take the time because you do want to respond to everything and you want to cater that response accordingly. Hustle has really great tools to help you respond quickly, and it does go very fast. So block out time for sure, because you want to make sure that you're getting those responses out as quickly as possible so you're engaging back with the folks that are engaging. But it does typically go really, really fast.
Thanks, Alex. And just to add one more thing to that, you can also within Hustle have some people be sending those initial messages and have other people doing the responses. So given that there will be fewer messages that need to be responded to than need to be sent, you can also break up the work a little bit and not have one person dedicated to it. You can share the load a little bit across the team.
That's a perfect segue to part 2 of the question. Can replies be done on a computer, or do staff need to use a phone to reply to the text?
Love these questions. Thank you. You can Hustle from our web app. So yes, you can do that from a computer, or you can use the phone. Either way is totally fine and supported.
Awesome. This is a great question from Julie. Have you found this successful across a variety of demographics?
Yes, that is a great question. And the answer is also yes. So a lot of, folks ask, especially across age demographics, if it's a relevant channel for outreach. And Ben and Alex, if you'd like to speak to this as well, please feel free. But I've worked with organizations that have variety of supporter bases, from geography to age across the board, and it's been effective in all of them that we've seen. The important thing is that you know your audience and that you cater the messaging to them in a way that makes sense.
Cool.
And it is kind of fun to see the different ways people respond when you're texting like the Midwest versus the East Coast versus the West Coast, because people do text differently, and it's somewhat entertaining as someone who is sending the messages. It is that we've used it both for gala fundraisers where there's a level of engagement that's there already, as Ben talked about, for grassroots and our political activism, and then for smaller fundraisers where there's not as much as, not necessarily a high giving level, but a frequent giving level. And it's worked across the board in all of those situations.
Yeah, and this has been with Human Rights Campaign. I would say that in areas where we have not had a lot of engagement through emails and stuff like this, and where we know that younger people are using their phones as their primary form of getting on the internet, we have seen tremendous response from communities of color in that sort of 18 to 40 age range, where they are really engaging on their telephones. It's how they're shopping, it's how they're communicating with friends. And so it's not just the age thing, we've seen it also around race as well.
Thanks for that, Ben.
Awesome. Another question from Dana. How would you recommend turning a no into a yes? If at first they say they aren't interested, how do you respond to them or circle back to try and engage them later?
Great question, Dana. So really, when we talk about texting, a lot of the skill sets that we already use as fundraisers or organizers are put to use just in a different medium. And so I would first, with your specific audience, how would you usually do that? How would you usually turn a no to a yes? And then think about ways to translate that over text. Just because a lot of times I think that because it's a new channel, it seems like there are new ways to do things. And there are some, of course, but from a philosophical standpoint, you could still approach it from like a very similar place, depending on what your work is and how you have those conversations with your folks. I would say, so that I'm not putting the onus just back on you, some of the ways in which people do that, turning those no's into yeses, is around engagement of other types. So maybe they say, no, I can't give a donation at this time. The follow-up is still open and friendly and gives other options. Like, no problem. I totally understand that that's the case. Are you interested in X? So whatever is relevant to your organization. Maybe that's, joining, signing up for the newsletter or volunteering or attending an event or something else. So I would recommend having a follow-up ask that isn't another way to ask that same thing, but instead is an invitation to do something else.
Great. From Everly, how does pricing work for Hustle, and is there special pricing for nonprofits?
That's a great question, and probably a better one for follow-up. Sales@hustle.com is where you can reach our sales folks. I work on the implementation side, not on the sales side. And so I don't want to give you a wrong answer. But in general, we have different packages for different folks.
Perfect. And then we'll end with one last question from another Lauren. What happens if someone replies to a text several weeks after it was originally sent? The recipient or supporter may think of that number as a way to reach the organization with a question, will their message be seen?
Yeah, it will be seen. So it depends on how you set everything up in Hustle. And as follow-ups, we'll send lots of information after this, of course, about how to learn more. But the short answer is that the number stays open and you can have that follow-up conversation. It just depends on how you set it up in the system in terms of who is receiving that notification and having that conversation. But Alex, I'm sure that happens in your work. And Ben, I'm sure it's happened for you as well.
Yeah, we did get one that I wasn't an admin on, but I was texting for after the election from someone who was like, oh, I tried so hard to elect this person. I'm sad that it didn't go my way, which was actually pretty amazing because it, again, was that personal outreach that like someone felt so, from the text message, someone felt tight enough with that person that had reached out to them to say like, turn to them when they were sad about the results of the election. And hopefully we'll continue doing so we can continue having that conversation. That being said, we don't get a ton of random text messages. And when we do, there's usually specific to what we text about, at least for the dinner specific ones. I'll get some that are like, I want an auction item. How do I get it? But I don't usually get like, oh, what does HRC think about this issue weeks and weeks later? I have them all on my admin, so if it pops up, I see it. It's not super frequent, but when it is, it's a positive sign for us that they're continuing to engage. Ben, you may have a different experience just in the sheer numbers that you all text.
No, I think you're absolutely right. We don't have a lot of just random texts that come out. After the 2016 election, we got a lot of text messages coming in. People are expressing their disappointment in the results of 2016, their fear as being LGBTQ people, what that meant for them. And we're looking for ways that they could sort of direct their fear, their frustration, and their anger around the results. We had a place for them to go. We created HRC Rising, and so we engaged with these people around how to, one, double down on their advocacy efforts, their electoral efforts, making sure that their family and friends were registered to vote and having those conversations. And so it's really, as Alex and Shay said, happens around whatever we are texting people about. And so we don't get random things around where does HRC stand on X issue, or why haven't HRC been outspoken about this issue. It's mostly dealing with the current thing that we are engaging in the conversation with. I think that people stick with that because, one, we are having a conversation about that current environment. We do answer questions that come in randomly, but mostly it is, as Alex said, asking about events that we have coming up. You know, hey, Drag Bingo is coming up. What night is that? What time is it? Or about events that we have going on. When is our New Orleans dinner, our Atlanta dinner? Or, you know, will there be a booth at Pride? And those are all easy questions for us to answer. But generally, people only have that in-depth conversation about what we actually sent out first, and they're continuing to have the conversation with us.
Yeah. And I'll also add to that there is a relational component to all of this that is one of the primary reasons that people stay engaged as donors and supporters in our work. And so in terms of, you know, that conversation and where it goes and where it ends, and I'd encourage everybody who's on Hustle to consider how valuable that is, and that, you know, we set up in a way that makes sure that when supporters are writing back, that they're able to continue that in the way that they want to, because what that means is that they actually care and they feel a part of it. And that's good for everybody.
Great. And then I know I said last question, but we had one more come through. How do you engage with people who express support for your cause but ask you not to text anymore? What's the best way to find out their preferred method of communication without putting up a roadblock by sending yet another text if all you have is a cell number?
Absolutely. And that is a great question. So one thing within Hustle, there is a feature to opt folks out so that they don't hear from you via Hustle anymore. And so that's an easy request to respect and doesn't take much at all. In terms of learning, you could ask them if they prefer email or direct mail or whatever, and then tag them in the system as that. But in general, if people have a preference over text, they will tell you in their opt-out, like, actually, I'd rather get this type of communication from you. So that doesn't happen super often in the fundraising realm if the messaging is good. But of course, if folks don't want to be texted, that is very, very easy to respect.
Great. Well, that wraps up all of our questions. Thank you so much, Shay, Ben, and Alex, for all of your insight, and to everyone for joining us today. We'll be sending out the webinar recording and the slides to all attendees later this afternoon, so keep an eye out for those, and hope to see you guys all back for a future webinar.